A small-town vet rushes to a lonely farmhouse, expecting a routine delivery, but what she finds is beyond anything she imagined. 8 tiny creatures, innocent and fragile, hidden in plain sight. But one glance, and she knows something is terribly wrong. As she scrambles to save them, the stakes skyrocket. Someone powerful doesn't want the truth to get out, and every second counts. With a loyal ally by her side and a fearless reporter drawn into the chaos, she uncovers a secret network that will stop at nothing to cover its tracks. Each discovery raises new dangers, and the line between life and death becomes impossibly thin. Who put these children in harm's way? And can one determined vet expose the truth before it's too late? What would you risk to save lives no one else even knows exist? The late autumn wind whistled through the cracks of the old Henderson farmhouse as Lark Havers pulled her truck onto the gravel driveway. Her headlights cut through the evening darkness, illuminating peeling paint and weather-worn boards that sagged beneath years of neglect. Brittle leaves skittered across the yard, dancing in the cold gusts that promised an early winter. The call had seemed straightforward enough, a stray dog giving birth in the abandoned property. But something about the urgency in the anonymous caller's voice had set her on edge, a prickle of unease that crawled up her spine like icy fingers. Lark grabbed her medical kit from the passenger seat, her boots crunching on fallen leaves as she approached the front door. The worn wooden steps creaked under her weight, protesting with each footfall as if warning her to turn back. She pulled out her flashlight, its beam revealing cobwebs in the corners of the sagging porch and the remains of a bird's nest tucked beneath the eaves. The air smelled of decay and impending rain. "Hello?" she called out, pushing open the unlocked door that groaned on rusted hinges. "Animal control? Anyone here?" Her voice echoed through the empty spaces, bouncing back to her ears with a hollow quality that only heightened her apprehension. Only silence answered, broken occasionally by the soft patter of something small scurrying within the walls. The musty smell of abandonment filled her nostrils as she stepped inside, mixing with something else, something organic and recent that didn't belong in a house long deserted. Dust motes floated in her flashlight beam as she swept it across the barren living room with its peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling. Her heart quickened as she ventured deeper, listening intently until she heard it. A soft whimpering coming from the kitchen, barely audible above the wind's mournful song. "There you are," she murmured, following the sound past a tilting doorframe into what had once been a country kitchen. The beam of light revealed a large cardboard box in the corner, lined with dirty blankets that might have once been white. Inside, she could make out several small, squirming shapes that moved weakly beneath the fabric. Lark knelt beside the box, her practiced eyes quickly assessing the situation as she set her flashlight down to illuminate the scene. The damp cardboard gave slightly beneath her touch, suggesting recent placement. But as she reached in to check the first puppy, her heart stopped, the world around her grinding to a sudden, terrible halt. The small form she lifted wasn't covered in fur at all. It was smooth skin, tiny human fingers curled into a delicate fist, a button nose above quivering lips. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands trembling as she cradled the infant. The baby was newborn, umbilical cord roughly cut and hastily tied, still covered in birth fluids that had dried in patches on translucent skin. "Oh my God." The words fell from her lips like stones, inadequate against the horror unfolding before her. Her training kicked in even as her mind reeled, professionalism overriding shock. She quickly checked the baby's airways and breathing, finding them clear but noting the child's cool skin and bluish tinge to the lips. Working on autopilot, her fingers moving with practiced precision despite their trembling, she tucked the infant inside her coat for warmth, while reaching for her phone with her free hand. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice sounded tinny and distant against the thundering of Lark's own heartbeat in her ears. This is Dr. Lark Havers, veterinarian at Pine Hollow Animal Hospital, she said, forcing her voice to stay steady when everything inside her wanted to scream. I'm at the old Henderson place on Route 23. I need police and emergency medical services immediately. I found... Her voice caught in her throat, the reality of the situation threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. I've found abandoned infants. While talking to dispatch, she carefully checked the box again, pushing aside a grimy fleece blanket. Her stomach lurched violently, bile rising in her throat. There were 3 more babies, all newborn, all human, their tiny bodies intertwined as if seeking warmth from each other. They were alive but cold, making only weak sounds that tore at her heart like physical pain. Her fingers flew across her phone again, this time calling her most trusted colleague. Marisol, I need you. Emergency at the Henderson farm. Bring all our warming equipment and blankets, every heating pad we have. Don't ask questions. Just hurry, now. The urgency in her voice left no room for argument. Lark worked methodically, checking each infant's vitals while keeping them as warm as possible against her body. Her mind raced with questions that had no answers. Who would do this? Where were the mothers? Were they victims too? The sound of tires crunching rapidly on gravel made her tense, her body instinctively curving protectively around the babies until she recognized Marisol's car headlights through the window, cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. Marisol burst through the door moments later, arms full of supplies, her normally composed face flushed from exertion. She stopped short at the sight before her, dark eyes widening with horror and disbelief. Dios mío, she breathed, the supplies nearly slipping from her suddenly slack grip. Those aren't puppies. Help me get them stable, Lark ordered, already reaching for the warming packs Marisol had brought. They're hypothermic. This one's the weakest. She nodded toward a particularly small infant, whose breathing seemed more labored than the others. The 2 women worked in practiced synchronization, their hands moving with the efficiency born from years of emergency medicine, wrapping each infant in warm blankets, checking vital signs, monitoring respiratory rates. They did everything they could with their veterinary supplies until proper medical help arrived, improvising when necessary with a determination that left no room for the horror that threatened to overwhelm them. In the distance, sirens began to wail, growing steadily louder as help approached. Who would leave them here? Marisol whispered, gently rubbing one baby's tiny feet to encourage circulation, her face a mask of controlled fury beneath her professional focus. Who could do something like this? Lark shook her head, her throat tight with emotion and rage that threatened to choke her. Someone who thought they wouldn't be found. She looked around the abandoned kitchen, noting details she'd missed in her initial shock. Fresh tire tracks visible through the window, a discarded pair of surgical gloves in the trash, footprints in the dust that weren't her own. Someone who's done this before. The realization settled over her like a physical weight, dark and suffocating. The sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights began to flash through the windows, casting the room in an eerie, pulsating glow that made the infant's skin look alternately flushed and deathly pale. Lark gathered herself, mentally preparing for the questions that would come, knowing she would need to explain everything to law enforcement with clinical precision. But as she looked down at the 4 tiny faces, now warming and showing more color in their previously ashen cheeks, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to let this go. These weren't just patients. They were evidence of something unthinkable. Someone had left these babies to die, counting on their cries being mistaken for puppies in an abandoned house where no one would look too closely The thought made her blood boil, a righteous anger that crystallized into resolve. The first police car pulled up outside, followed closely by an ambulance whose lights bathed the decrepit farmhouse in urgent illumination. Lark squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. These infants had been abandoned in her town, on her watch, and she was going to make damn sure they were safe now. And then she was going to find out who had done this, no matter where that path might lead. As Lark and Marisol worked frantically to stabilize the infants, their initial count of 4 babies doubled as they discovered more tiny forms buried deeper in the blankets. The dim kitchen now held 8 newborns, all requiring immediate attention, their skin mottled with concerning bluish tints under the weak overhead light. The abandoned farmhouse creaked around them, as if protesting the secret it had been forced to keep. "Get me more warming packs," Lark instructed, her voice tight with urgency as she pressed her stethoscope to a particularly small infant's chest. "And call the hospital. Tell them we need multiple infant transport units. These babies need neonatal specialists immediately." Marisol nodded, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the chill in the air. The baby's weak cries filled the musty air, each sound piercing Lark's heart as she continued her assessment, moving from one to the next with practiced efficiency despite the unprecedented situation. She'd treated countless animals in crisis, but never this. Never human children abandoned like unwanted kittens. "Yes, that's right. 8 of them," Marisol was saying into the phone, her voice breaking. "No, not a mistake. 8 newborns." Heavy boots thundered on the rotting porch boards outside, and Sheriff Amos Kincaid's imposing bulk filled the doorway moments later. His flashlight beam swept across the kitchen, harsh and accusatory, landing on Lark and Marisol huddled over their charges. The light cast long, threatening shadows against the peeling wallpaper. "What's all this commotion about?" he demanded, stepping inside, his sheriff's badge catching the light as he moved. "Got a call about abandoned puppies? Folks are saying someone's making a fuss over nothing." Lark straightened, deliberately positioning herself between the sheriff and the infants. Her shadow fell protectively over the makeshift examination area they'd created on the kitchen table. "These aren't puppies, Sheriff. These are human babies, 8 of them. They need immediate medical attention. Their core temperatures are dangerously low, and at least 3 show signs of respiratory distress." Kincaid's face hardened as he moved closer, his boots heavy on the warped linoleum, peering at the blanket-wrapped bundles. The scent of his aftershave, too strong, too artificial, mingled with the musty air. "Nonsense. This is clearly just a litter of farm mutts. We get calls like this all the time. You're working yourself up over nothing, Doctor." "I'm a licensed veterinarian," Lark said firmly, her green eyes flashing with indignation. She stepped forward, matching his intimidating stance with her own protective posture. "I know the difference between puppies and human infants. These are newborns, likely only hours old. They're hypothermic and at risk. Several have umbilical cords that weren't properly clamped. One has jaundice that needs immediate treatment." The sheriff's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath his leathery skin. "Now listen here, Dr. Havers. You're obviously confused, maybe overworked. I'll handle this situation. You and your assistant can head on home. I've got deputies who can take these animals to the right place." Marisol glanced uncertainly between Lark and the sheriff, clutching a warming pack to her chest like a shield. In the background, one of the infants let out a high-pitched, desperate wail that couldn't possibly be mistaken for anything but human. Lark didn't budge, even as she registered the distant wail of ambulance sirens getting closer through the night air. "I will not leave these babies," she stated, her voice steel-edged despite the tremor of adrenaline running through her body. She met Kincaid's gaze unflinchingly. "They need immediate medical care, and I've already notified emergency services. The hospital is sending transport teams. These children deserve proper medical attention, and they'll get it." "You're overstepping your authority," Kincaid growled, stepping closer until she could smell the coffee and tobacco on his breath. His hand rested meaningfully on his holstered gun. "This is a police matter now, and I'm telling you these are just puppies that need to go to the shelter. You're seeing things that aren't there, Doctor. Happens to the best of us when we're tired." "Look at them," Lark challenged, carefully lifting one of the blankets to reveal a tiny human face, perfect in its formation, despite the pallor and slight cyanosis around the lips. "These are infants, Sheriff. Human children who were left here to die. And I don't care what you say. I'm not leaving until they're safely in medical care. What's happening here isn't normal. And you know it." The ambulance pulled up outside, its red lights painting the kitchen walls in crimson flashes through the grimy windows. The wail of its siren cut off, leaving a charged silence broken only by the whimpers of the newborns. Kincaid's face darkened with anger, his eyes narrowing to dangerous slits. "You're making a mistake, Doctor," he warned, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "Some things in this town are better left alone. Some stones shouldn't be turned over. People who poke their noses where they don't belong tend to regret it." "Are you threatening me, Sheriff?" Lark asked quietly, even as she gestured the paramedics inside with urgent waves. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her gaze remained steady. "Because these babies deserve to live, and I'm not backing down. Not for you, not for anyone in this town who thinks this is acceptable." The paramedics rushed in with their equipment, their expressions shifting from professional focus to shock as they registered the scene before them. The momentary distraction broke the tension between Lark and Kincaid, Lark and Marisol, and quickly briefed them on the infant's conditions, heart rates, temperatures, breathing patterns, while Kincaid watched from the doorway, his expression thunderous, hands flexing at his sides. "This isn't over," he said finally, turning to leave, his silhouette massive against the doorframe. "You should have minded your own business. This town has ways of dealing with people who don't understand the natural order of things." Lark watched him go, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken as his cruiser's headlights swept across the window and disappeared down the rutted driveway. She turned back to help the paramedics prepare the babies for transport, her hands moving automatically despite the tremor that had settled deep in her bones. She knew she had just made a powerful enemy, one with the law and the town behind him. But looking at the tiny faces now receiving proper medical care, oxygen masks smaller than her palm being gently secured, warming blankets being wrapped around fragile bodies, she knew she had done the right thing. "You stood up to him," Marisol whispered, helping to secure one of the infants in a transport unit, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Nobody stands up to Sheriff Kincaid, not ever. The last person who tried—" She trailed off, glancing nervously toward the door. "Well, somebody should," Lark replied, her hands gentle as she wrapped another baby, a little girl with a dusting of dark hair across her perfect scalp. "Because something is very wrong here, and these little ones deserve better. Everyone deserves better than whatever is happening in this town." They worked steadily alongside the paramedics, ensuring each infant was properly stabilized for the journey to the hospital. The tiny chests rose and fell under Lark's watchful gaze as monitors beeped confirmation of 8 struggling but persistent heartbeats. Lark couldn't shake the memory of Kincaid's threatening tone or the cold calculation in his eyes, but she pushed it aside to focus on the immediate crisis. 8 lives hung in the balance, and she had chosen her side. Whatever came next, whatever retribution the sheriff might attempt, she would face it knowing she had followed her conscience when it mattered most. As the last ambulance pulled away from the farmhouse, Lark sat heavily in her truck, her hands trembling uncontrollably on the steering wheel. The flashing red and blue lights receded into the distance, leaving them in the eerie, silent darkness of the rural night. Marisol climbed into the passenger seat, her face drawn with worry, deep lines etching themselves between her brows. "Something's not adding up," Lark muttered, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, vibrating beneath them like her own churning anxiety. 8 newborns, all about the same age, just abandoned in the middle of nowhere, in matching bassinets with identical blankets. Who does that? Marisol pulled out her phone, her fingers moving. Quickly across the screen, the blue glow illuminating her troubled expression. "I've been texting my cousin at Pine Valley Hospital. She works night shift in maternity." She paused, swallowing hard. "She says they've had issues lately. Serious issues they're trying to keep quiet." "What kind of issues?" Lark navigated the truck down the winding country road, her headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. "Missing babies." Marisol's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, as if someone might be listening even here. 3 families in the past month claimed their newborns disappeared from the nursery. One mother woke up from her C-section and was told her baby had never existed. The hospital called them confused, said they were mistaken about their delivery dates. One couple was even sent for psychiatric evaluation when they wouldn't stop demanding answers. Lark's hands tightened on the wheel until her knuckles turned white, the blood draining from them as they drove through the dark streets. Streetlights cast intermittent pools of yellow across her face. "That's impossible. Hospitals have strict security protocols for newborns. ID bands, matching numbers, alarms on the doors. There's cameras everywhere." "Unless someone on the inside is helping," Marisol said, her breath fogging the window as she leaned against it. "My cousin mentioned a new administrator, Evelyn Rourke. Came in from some fancy hospital in Boston 6 months ago with her designer suits and perfect blowouts. And suddenly all these wealthy out-of-town couples started having their babies here. In our little hospital. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Pine Valley isn't exactly known for its world-class maternity care." They pulled into the hospital parking lot, where media vans were already gathering like vultures, their satellite dishes raised to the night sky. Camera crews huddled in the harsh fluorescent light of the entrance. Lark recognized the sleek figure of Evelyn Rourke standing at the entrance, her posture impeccable as she spoke smoothly to reporters. Even at this hour, not a hair was out of place. "This is clearly a case of abandoned animals," Evelyn was saying, her perfectly styled hair gleaming under the camera lights. Her voice carried across the parking lot, confident and authoritative. "We're investigating how this miscommunication occurred. We're not sure why emergency services were called to report human infants, but we can assure the community that no children were involved. The veterinary clinic is handling the situation appropriately." "That's a lie," Marisol hissed, her hands balling into fists. "We saw them with our own eyes. I helped wrap those babies. I felt their tiny fingers gripping mine. What is she doing?" Lark watched as Evelyn fielded questions with practiced ease, deflecting each one with the skill of someone who had built a career on crisis management. "She's trying to control the narrative before it spirals. But why? What happens if people realize those were actual human babies we found?" They made their way inside, flashing their veterinary IDs at security guards who seemed unusually tense. In the emergency department, they found controlled chaos as staff scrambled to care for the 8 newborns. Incubators had been wheeled in, monitors beeped steadily, but something felt off. There were no social workers present, no child services representatives, no police taking statements. Just hospital staff working with unusual secrecy. A young nurse with dark circles under her eyes pulled them aside, glancing nervously over her shoulder before speaking. "You need to be careful," she whispered, her name badge partially obscured by her sweater. "This isn't the first time we've had strange baby cases, but anyone who asks questions suddenly finds themselves transferred to the midnight shift in the furthest satellite clinic or fired for protocol violations. How many cases? Lark asked, keeping her voice equally low. I've seen at least 12 in the past few months. Babies listed as stillborn who cried when they were born. I heard one myself. Healthy newborns marked as deceased during transport. Always with wealthy private clients hovering nearby, taking pictures with their phones like they're shopping. And always with Ms. Rourke supervising personally. Marisol's phone buzzed loudly in the quiet hallway. She read the message and went pale, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. My cousin just got fired. Security is escorting her out right now. They're saying she violated patient privacy by texting me. How did they even know we were communicating? Lark's mind raced, connecting the dots like a constellation of horror forming before her eyes. The missing hospital babies, the wealthy clients appearing from nowhere, Evelyn's immediate damage control, Sheriff Kincaid's unusual threats at the farm, the lack of official documentation. This isn't random, she said slowly, her voice dropping to a whisper. These babies weren't abandoned. They were being moved. We interrupted some kind of transport. That's why they were all together, all the same age. A trafficking network, Marisol breathed, her eyes widening as the full implication hit her. Using the hospital as cover to steal babies and sell them to wealthy couples who don't want to wait for legal adoption. With someone powerful protecting it. Lark watched as Evelyn strode through the emergency department, speaking quietly to key staff members, touching shoulders, making direct eye contact. Each person she spoke to immediately changed direction or task. That's why Kincaid wanted us gone so quickly. He's part of it. He wasn't there to investigate. He was there to clean up. They watched as hospital security, wearing uniforms that seemed newer and more professional than usual, began clearing non-essential personnel from the ward. Through the window of the nurses' station, they could see the babies being moved to a secure unit. On the 3rd floor, one controlled by Evelyn's administrative team, away from the regular nursery. We have to do something, Marisol said, her voice cracking with emotion. Those babies have real parents out there somewhere. Mothers who went to sleep thinking their babies had died or never existed. Families being gaslit into thinking they're crazy while their children are sold off. First, we need proof. Lark pulled out her phone and began documenting everything they'd seen, typing rapidly with trembling fingers. Times, dates, names, your cousin's firing, the security badges of everyone involved, everything that doesn't add up. Screenshots of the ambulance dispatch records if you can get them. What about the parents who lost babies? Could we find them? They must be devastated thinking they're going crazy. Marisol's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. If they're still in town. But we have to be careful. We're dealing with something bigger than just a few corrupt officials. This is organized, professional. These people have resources and connections. They've been doing this for months without anyone stopping them. They watched as Evelyn emerged from the secure unit, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum as she spoke into her phone with sharp, angry gestures. Her polished exterior couldn't quite hide her agitation at having her careful system disrupted. For the first time, the veneer of control seemed to be cracking. 8 babies, Lark murmured, the horror of it settling deep in her bones. 8 families somewhere thinking they lost their children, grieving empty nurseries, putting away tiny clothes that will never be worn. And who knows how many more before them. The weight of the revelation settled over them both, like a physical burden. They had stumbled onto something dark and systemic, something that reached into the highest levels of their small town's power structure. And now they were witnesses, possibly the only ones who could expose the truth, if they lived long enough to try. Lark's fingers trembled as she dialed the number she'd found online for Jonah Calder at the Pine Valley Gazette. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she listened to each ring, clutching the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. After 3 rings, a deep, authoritative voice answered. Calder speaking. Mr. Calder, my name is Dr. Lark Havers. I'm a veterinarian in Pine Hollow, and I've uncovered something big. She glanced at Marisol, who sat beside her with worried eyes but nodded encouragingly. It involves missing babies, hospital cover-ups, and local law enforcement corruption that goes deeper than I can even imagine. There was a pregnant pause on the line, the silence heavy with consideration. Go on. Lark took a deep breath that shuddered through her chest and explained everything in detail. The abandoned farmhouse with its makeshift nursery, the 8 helpless infants crying in dirty cribs. Sheriff. Kincaid's menacing threats when he arrived, and Evelyn Rourke's suspicious behavior controlling access at the hospital. She described the fear in the nurses' eyes, the missing paperwork, the eerie silence from officials who should have been outraged. Can you meet now? Jonah asked, his voice sharp with professional interest, an edge that told Lark he understood the gravity of what she was sharing. This isn't something we should discuss over the phone. Too many ears in this town. 20 minutes later, they sat in Lark's parked truck behind the veterinary clinic, hidden in shadows cast by the building. Jonah Calder was tall and intense, with a day's worth of stubble darkening his jaw and sharp, perceptive eyes that missed nothing as he recorded every detail in his worn leather notebook. His fingers moved quickly, annotating key points with practiced efficiency. 8 babies, he repeated, underlining the number twice and circling it for emphasis. And the sheriff tried to pass them off as puppies in front of trained medical professionals? He knew exactly what they were, Marisol said, leaning forward, her normally gentle face hardened with indignation. You should have seen his face when he walked in. He wasn't surprised at finding infants, just angry we had discovered them. Like we'd stumbled onto something we were never meant to see. Jonah nodded grimly, his jaw tightening. Kincaid's been on my radar for months. There have been rumors about corruption, missing evidence, selective enforcement, but nothing solid enough to print. His department closes ranks faster than you can blink. He turned to Lark, studying her with newfound intensity. You said Evelyn Rourke is involved? How deeply? She's controlling access to the babies at the hospital right now like a fortress guard. No social services, no proper protocols, no explanations to staff. Lark leaned forward, her green eyes flashing with urgency. And she's been administrator there for exactly 6 months, the same time these problems started appearing. That can't be coincidence. We need documentation, Jonah said, flipping to a fresh page with decisive force. Hospital records, staff testimonies, shift changes, security footage, anything that shows a pattern. My sources say wealthy couples have been coming to Pine Valley Hospital from all over the country, paying cash, signing minimal paperwork, leaving with babies, all with perfect timing. My cousin was fired today for telling us about the missing infants on the maternity ward, Marisol added, her voice dropping to a whisper despite their isolation. 6 years of exemplary service, then suddenly terminated without warning. They're systematically eliminating witnesses. Jonah's pen moved rapidly across the page, creating a complex web of connections and notes. Classic intimidation tactics, standard operating procedure when covering tracks this significant. His eyes met Lark's with surprising directness. They'll try to discredit you next, Dr. Havers. Probably start with your veterinary license. It's the easiest professional leverage they have. As if on cue, Lark's phone buzzed with a text notification. She pulled it out, her stomach dropping as she read the message aloud. Emergency review of practice credentials scheduled for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Attendance mandatory. State Veterinary Board. That was fast, Marisol said, her face darkening with anger, one hand instinctively reaching for Lark's arm in support. They're not even trying to hide what they're doing anymore. It means we're onto something real, Jonah replied, his expression oddly satisfied despite the threat. They wouldn't react this strongly if we were wrong, or if this was small time. He outlined a quick plan in his notebook, drawing arrows between action items. First priority is protecting those babies. I have contacts in federal child services. They can override local jurisdiction and cut through the bureaucratic nonsense. Sheriff Kincaid has the hospital locked down tight, Lark said, remembering the deputy stationed outside the ward door. No one gets in without explicit approval. I tried to check on the infants this afternoon and was physically blocked. Then we document everything from outside. Photos, videos, staff coming and going. Build a timeline. Jonah tapped his pen thoughtfully against his jaw. And we need to find those parents who lost babies. The ones told their infants died or were stillborn. They're our strongest evidence and most sympathetic witnesses. I can help with that, Marisol offered, straightening her shoulders with new determination. My cousin kept meticulous records of every suspicious case before she was fired. Names, dates, circumstances, everything that didn't add up. Suddenly, patrol cars rolled past the clinic, their powerful spotlights methodically sweeping the parking lot in slow, threatening arcs. Lark and her companions ducked down instinctively, holding their breath as the beams passed over the truck windows. They're watching us, Jonah muttered, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Good. Means they're scared. People make mistakes when they're afraid. What do we do now? Lark asked, her heart pounding against her ribs, the reality of their situation settling like a heavy weight. We split up. Harder to track us that way. Divide their resources. Jonah ripped pages from his notebook, folding them carefully before handing them out. Marisol, get those records from your cousin immediately, before anyone else does. Dr. Havers, you focus on documenting everything at the hospital. Every person who enters that secure ward, every supply delivery, every unusual movement. I'll start background checks on Rourke and dig into the money trail. Follow the payments. Is this really happening? Marisol whispered, her voice catching as she clutched her paper. Are we really taking on the whole town power structure? The hospital? The sheriff? Larky reached over and squeezed her friend's hand firmly, feeling the slight tremble beneath her fingers. We're the only ones who can. Those babies need us. Every single one of them has parents somewhere who deserve the truth. Jonah looked up from his notebook, his expression serious, eyes holding a gravity that spoke of previous battles. Once we start this, there's no going back. They'll come at us with everything they have. Professional attacks, personal smears, financial pressure. They have resources and influence we can't match conventionally. I don't care, Lark said firmly, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I took an oath to protect life. Maybe not officially as a vet, but as a human being with a conscience. I won't look away just because it's dangerous or inconvenient. Neither will I, Marisol added, her voice stronger now, drawing courage from Lark's certainty. Those could have been my sister's babies, my neighbor's children. Jonah nodded, a hint of admiration softening the intense focus in his eyes. Then let's get to work. Text only, encrypted apps if possible, burner phones if you can get them. Trust no one outside this truck. He handed them each a business card with multiple contact numbers scrawled on the back. If anything happens, if anyone threatens you or approaches you unexpectedly, call me immediately, anytime, day or night. They watched him disappear into the darkness, moving with practiced stealth between shadows. Minutes later, Marisol slipped away toward her cousin's house on the edge of town, following a route they'd mapped out to avoid main streets. Lark sat alone in her truck, watching another patrol car cruise deliberately past, its driver scanning the surroundings with predatory attention. The weight of what they were undertaking settled over her like a physical burden, but beneath the fear she felt a curious strength blossoming, knowing she wasn't facing this monstrous conspiracy alone. She pulled out her phone and began meticulously documenting everything that had happened since finding those babies, her fingers flying across the screen as she recorded every detail, every conversation, every suspicious action. The screen illuminated her determined face in the darkness as she created a record that couldn't be denied or erased. Whatever came next, whatever forces Evelyn Rourke and her accomplices would unleash, they would face it together, a veterinarian, a vet tech, and a journalist united by something stronger than fear. Lark glanced at her trembling hands and realized with surprise that they now moved with purpose rather than terror. Jonah's SUV crawled past Pine Valley Hospital for the third time that evening. In the passenger seat, Lark snapped photos of everyone entering and leaving the building. The camera's quiet clicks punctuated the tense silence between them. Through the lens, she could make out the silhouettes moving efficiently through the hospital's entrance, their faces briefly illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights before disappearing inside. "That's the fourth private security guard I've seen," Lark noted, checking the timestamp on her latest photo. She zoomed in on a broad-shouldered man with an earpiece standing near the emergency entrance. "They weren't here yesterday, not a single one." "They're circling the wagons," Jonah replied, keeping his speed steady to avoid drawing unwanted attention. His knuckles whitened slightly against the steering wheel. "Classic damage control. Restrict access, control the narrative. Someone's orchestrating this response, and they're not sparing any expense." Through her zoom lens, Lark captured a familiar face hurrying through the staff entrance. The man's shoulders were hunched, his movements furtive as he scanned the parking lot before slipping inside. "That's Dr. Mitchell. He delivered 3 of the babies we found." Her stomach tightened into a painful knot, acid rising in her throat. "He has to know what's happening. There's no way he could be involved in this many cases without being complicit." "Add him to the list," Jonah said, making a mental note as he navigated through the quiet evening traffic. "We'll need to approach these people carefully. Some might talk if they feel safe enough. They're not all monsters. Some could be trapped, like Marisol was." Lark's phone buzzed in her pocket, the vibration startling her from her thoughts. A text from Marisol flashed across the screen. "Meeting you now. Found something." Jonah quickly changed direction, and they picked Marisol up 2 blocks away from the hospital. She glanced nervously over her shoulder before climbing into the back seat, clutching a thick manila envelope to her chest, as though it contained priceless treasures. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, the paper rustling in the quiet interior of the SUV. "These are copies of intake forms," she said, spreading papers across her lap like playing cards. The overhead streetlights cast intermittent shadows across the documents. "My cousin managed to grab them before she was fired last week. Look at the dates, all within the last 6 months. They've been accelerating the operation." Lark twisted in her seat to study the documents, her trained medical eye quickly scanning the technical terminology. "Multiple birth complications, emergency C-sections, placental abruptions." Her eyes narrowed as she flipped through page after page. But no record of where the babies went afterward. Not a single transfer document or death certificate. "Because I helped falsify the transfer papers," Marisol said quietly. The confession seemed to physically deflate her, shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "Last year, when my mother got sick with stage 4 cancer, Evelyn Rourke approached me. Said she could get Mom into an experimental treatment program at Johns Hopkins, but I had to help her with some special administrative work. I was desperate. Insurance wouldn't cover the treatment." Jonah's eyes met Lark's in the rearview mirror, a silent understanding passing between them. "How long did this go on?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. 3 months. I thought I was just processing unusual adoptions for wealthy clients who wanted discretion." Marisol's voice cracked like thin ice. Her fingers twisted the edge of one document until it tore. Then I saw them taking a baby from its mother while she was still sedated from surgery. They told her the baby didn't survive. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheekbone. I quit the next day, but Rourke kept evidence of what I'd done. Photos, my signature on documents. Said she'd make sure I never worked in medicine again if I talked. She'd ruin my mother's chances too. Lark reached back and squeezed her friend's hand, feeling the cold clamminess of Marisol's skin. You're doing the right thing now. That's what matters. We'll protect you, I promise. We can use this, Jonah said, turning onto a dimly lit side street where shadows swallowed most of the car. But we need more. Current staff willing to testify, financial records showing payments, communications between the conspirators. Something concrete that ties everything together. A police cruiser suddenly appeared behind them, blue and red lights flashing against the interior of their vehicle. Jonah checked his speed on the dashboard. Everyone stay calm. We haven't done anything wrong. No illegal U-turns, no speeding. Let me handle this if they stop us. The cruiser followed them for 6 tense blocks, close enough that Lark could make out the silhouette of the officer behind the wheel. Then, without warning, it peeled away down another street. Marisol released a shaky breath that fogged the window beside her. They're watching us, all of us. That wasn't coincidence. Not just the police, Jonah said, his journalist's instincts fully engaged. He pointed to a black sedan parked ahead, with 2 men sitting motionless inside. Private security? They've been tailing us since we left the hospital. Professional job. They're keeping their distance but never losing sight. Lark's phone chimed with an email notification. The bright screen illuminated her face as she read, her expression hardening. The State Medical Board moved up my review. It's tomorrow at 8 a.m. She scrolled through the message, lips pressed into a thin line. They're citing multiple complaints about professional conduct and ethical concerns. This is Evelyn's doing. She's trying to discredit me before we can expose her. They're moving faster than I expected, Jonah muttered, running a hand through his hair. We need to accelerate our timeline. They're trying to cut off our options one by one. He pulled into an empty parking lot behind a closed supermarket, positioning the car where they could see anyone approaching. Marisol, can you get us into the hospital's records room? We need the original files. My ID still works for the service entrance, but security checks everyone now. They've added a guard station since last week, Marisol explained, anxiety evident in her rapid speech. They'd recognize me instantly. What about maintenance access? Lark asked, remembering details from her years working at the hospital. The old wing has those underground tunnels for supply deliveries and equipment transport. Are those still accessible? Marisol nodded slowly, hope flickering across her face. Those cameras have been broken for months. Budget cuts forced them to prioritize patient areas for security upgrades. A hint of her old confidence returned, straightening her posture. I can get us in through there. The night janitor owes me a favor. I treated his daughter's cat for free last year. Too risky tonight, Jonah said, checking his watch. They're watching too closely, and they're on high alert. But tomorrow morning, during shift change when there's more commotion and staff coming and going, he grabbed his notebook from the center console and began jotting ideas. While they're busy trying to revoke your license, Dr. Havers, Marisol and I can— No, Lark cut in, her tone leaving no room for argument. I'm not sitting out. These people think they can intimidate us into silence with bureaucratic threats and surveillance. I won't give them the satisfaction. Her green eyes flashed with determination in the dim light. This is my fight too. The board review is just the beginning, Jonah warned, turning to face her fully. They'll dig into your past, pressure your clients to file complaints, maybe even threaten your clinic's lease. Evelyn has connections throughout this town. She'll use every one of them against you. Let them try. Lark's voice was steel, wrapped in velvet. Every minute we wait, another baby could disappear. Another mother could have her child stolen and be told her baby died. I won't stand by and watch it happen, not when I have the ability to stop it. Marisol straightened in her seat, drawing strength from Lark's resolve. I know where Rourke keeps her private files. Real paper records, nothing digital that can be erased remotely. But the office is always locked, and she carries the only key. Not during the fire alarm testing, Jonah said thoughtfully, the investigative gears in his mind turning rapidly. Monthly inspection is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Marisol finished, understanding dawning on her face. 8:15. Every department is required to evacuate for exactly 12 minutes while they test the system. The same time as Lark's board review. She met their eyes, determination hardening her features. They can't be in two places at once. Evelyn will be at my hearing. She'll want to watch me squirm personally. The pieces were falling into place like a complex puzzle, but the risks were mounting with each new development. As they continued planning their next moves in hushed, urgent tones, more patrol cars began circling the parking lot, their headlights sweeping across the asphalt in deliberate patterns. One cruiser slowed as it passed their vehicle, the officer inside making a show of writing something down. The message was crystal clear. They were being watched from multiple angles, and the opposition wasn't going to make this easy. Someone powerful was very, very nervous about what they might uncover. The lab tech's hands shook as she handed Lark the results. I ran it 3 times to be sure. Lark stared at the paper, her heart pounding. The genetic markers were unmistakable, a perfect match to the Holbrook baby, whose disappearance from St. Mary's Hospital had made headlines 2 months ago. Does anyone else know about this? Jonah asked, his reporter's instincts kicking in. The tech shook her head. Just us. I used my lunch break to run the tests off book. She glanced nervously at the door. They've been watching the lab equipment logs, but I used the old machine they keep for training. No digital records. Lark sank into a chair, the weight of this revelation pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about saving abandoned infants anymore. They'd stumbled onto something much bigger, a calculated operation targeting specific babies. The Holbrooks, she said quietly. They're state Supreme Court justices, both of them. Jonah was already typing notes on his phone, which means whoever's running this trafficking ring isn't just preying on vulnerable mothers. They're deliberately stealing babies from powerful families. But why? Lark ran her fingers through her hair, frustration evident in every movement. The risk doesn't make sense. Taking a judge's baby? Unless that was exactly the point. Jonah's eyes lit up with grim understanding. Think about it. What better way to ensure silence than to have leverage over the very people who could shut you down? The lab tech cleared her throat. There's something else. She pulled up another file. The blood type patterns in the other infants, they match missing baby cases from 3 different hospitals in the region, all from prominent families. Lark's mind raced. The scheme was bigger than they'd imagined, more calculated. These weren't random kidnappings. They were targeted attacks meant to build a network of silence through blackmail. We need to document everything, Jonah said, pulling out his camera. Every test result, every match. No digital trails they can erase. Lark nodded, but her hands were trembling. These babies. Their parents think they're dead. They've been grieving while their children were just miles away, being used as pawns. The raw emotion in her voice made Jonah pause. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We're going to fix this, Lark. We're going to get those babies back to their families. The lab tech suddenly stiffened. Someone's coming. She quickly gathered the papers, stuffing them into a folder. The backup files are hidden in the supply closet behind the extra pipette boxes. Get them out of here. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Jonah grabbed the folder while Lark tried to look casual, pretending to examine a microscope. The door opened, revealing Sheriff Kincaid's deputy. "Routine inspection," he drawled, though his eyes were sharp, "making sure all equipment is properly logged." "Of course," the tech said smoothly. "I was just showing Dr. Havers our new cell counting system for her veterinary work." The deputy's gaze lingered on Jonah. "Awful lot of interest in lab equipment for a newspaper man." "Working on a piece about rural healthcare modernization," Jonah replied easily. "Fascinating stuff, really. Would you like to comment on the department's role in supporting medical advancement?" The deputy's face soured. He made a show of checking the equipment logs before leaving, but the message was clear. They were being watched. Once he was gone, Lark released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We need to move fast. Once they figure out we know about the Holbrook connection. They'll either try to move the babies or destroy the evidence," Jonah finished. He pulled out his phone, showing her a text. "My editor's ready to run the story as soon as we give the word. Full exposé with all the documentation we've gathered." "Not yet," Lark said firmly. "Not until we're sure the babies are safe. If we spook them too soon." She couldn't finish the thought. The lab tech nodded in agreement. "I'll keep digging, see if I can match the other infants to specific cases. But please, be careful. These people, they're not just criminals. They have real power." Lark thought of the 8 tiny faces she'd found in that farmhouse, of the grieving parents who didn't know their children were alive. The moral weight of it all pressed down on her, but it also strengthened her resolve. "Power isn't the same as being right," she said quietly, "and it's not stronger than the truth." As they left the lab, Jonah's camera heavy with evidence in his bag, Lark felt the shift in their mission. This wasn't just about saving abandoned infants anymore. It was about exposing a conspiracy that preyed on families, that twisted justice into a weapon. The stakes had grown, but so had her determination to see it through. Lark paced the small office in the veterinary clinic, her footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the blinds as she, Jonah, and Marisol gathered to regroup after the lab revelations. "We need a plan that protects the babies first," Lark insisted, stopping to lean against her desk. "Everything else comes second." Jonah nodded, spreading out his notes across her workspace. "I've got contacts at 3 major newspapers ready to run the story. But you're right. We need to ensure the infant's safety before we go public." Marisol sat quietly in the corner, her usual confidence dimmed. She twisted her hands in her lap, a gesture Lark had come to recognize as a sign of internal struggle. "Marisol?" Lark asked gently. "What are you thinking?" The vet tech took a deep breath. I know more than I've told you." Her voice trembled slightly. 2 years ago, they approached me, said they needed someone with medical training to help monitor some special cases. I didn't know what it really was at first. Jonah leaned forward, his reporter's instincts engaged. "Who approached you?" "Evelyn Rourke. She runs the adoption agency, but it's just a front." Marisol's words came faster now, like a dam breaking. "When I figured out what was happening, I tried to leave, but they had pictures of my sister's kids, made it clear what would happen if I talked." Lark crossed the room, placing a hand on Marisol's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore. We can protect your family." "That's just it," Marisol said, straightening her spine. "I know their patterns, their safe houses. I can help you stop them, really stop them." Jonah pulled out a fresh notepad. "Tell us everything." For the next hour, Marisol detailed the network's operations, the corrupt hospital staff, the private adoption brokers, the safe houses where babies were kept before being sold. Lark and Jonah mapped it all out on a large whiteboard, connecting names and locations. "We need 3 things," Lark said finally, capping the marker. "Medical documentation proving the babies' identities, legal leverage to protect them once we move, and a media strategy that makes it impossible for them to cover this up." "I can get signed statements from sympathetic nurses," Marisol offered. "There are others like me, people who want to help but are scared." Jonah tapped his pen against his notepad. "I've got a contact at the State Attorney General's office. If we present enough evidence, they might grant emergency protective custody." "And I know exactly where they're keeping the babies now," Lark added, her green eyes fierce. "The farmhouse was just a temporary holding site. They've moved them to a private clinic outside town. Together they crafted a timeline. Marisol would gather statements and medical records. Jonah would prepare the story and coordinate with state authorities. Lark would monitor the clinic and prepare for the baby's medical needs once they were rescued. "We move in 3 days," Lark declared. "Any longer and we risk them relocating the infants again." Marisol stood, her face set with determination. "I should have done this a long time ago. I let fear stop me, but seeing you fight for these babies..." She looked at Lark with admiration. "It reminded me why I got into veterinary medicine in the first place, to help those who can't help themselves." "Fear is their weapon," Jonah said, gathering his notes. "But the truth is ours. Once this story breaks, they won't be able to threaten anyone else." Lark began organizing medical supplies, her movements precise and purposeful. "We'll need incubators, monitoring equipment. Marisol, can you check our stock of infant-sized oxygen masks?" The plan was coming together, each piece falling into place. But beneath their focused activity lay an undercurrent of urgency. Somewhere in Pine Hollow, 8 tiny lives hung in the balance, waiting for justice that was finally on its way. "Whatever happens," Lark said, looking at her allies, "we do this right, by the book. No one can question our methods when this goes public." Jonah and Marisol nodded in agreement. They had become more than a team. They were a force for change, driven by compassion and the unshakable belief that truth would prevail. The morning newspaper hit Pine Hollow like a thunderclap. "Local vet uncovers suspicious infant activity," blazed across the front page, accompanied by carefully selected photos of the farmhouse. Lark stood in her clinic's waiting room, reading the article for the 3rd time, while her hands shook slightly. Jonah had crafted the story masterfully, revealing just enough to spark public outrage without compromising their ongoing investigation. The piece detailed the discovery of multiple infants in dangerous conditions, hinted at official misconduct, and raised questions about missing babies from regional hospitals. "Phone's been ringing non-stop," Marisol said, poking her head through the doorway. 3 different news stations want interviews." Lark nodded, still scanning the article. "Any word from the sheriff's office?" "Better than that." Jonah strode through the front door, his face bright with barely contained excitement. "Just got off the phone with my contact at the state police. They're launching a formal investigation into Kincaid. He's been placed on administrative leave pending review." Relief flooded through Lark's body. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been until that moment. Really? They're actually doing something? "The evidence was too compelling to ignore," Jonah explained, pulling out his notebook. "Once we connected the dots between the farmhouse incident and those missing hospital records, the state couldn't look the other way. Plus, public pressure is building. Social media's exploding with the story." Outside the clinic windows, Lark could see people gathered in small groups, discussing the newspaper. Some pointed at her building, their faces concerned and curious. Pine Hollow was a small town. News traveled fast, and everyone knew everyone else's business. "Look at this," Marisol said, holding up her phone. Local Facebook groups were filled with comments from concerned citizens. Some shared stories about suspicious adoptions they'd witnessed or heard about. Others demanded answers from local officials. "We've cracked their armor," Jonah said, his voice quiet but intense. "They can't operate in the shadows anymore." The clinic's door chimed as a young nurse from Pine Hollow General Hospital walked in. Her badge identified her as Sarah Chen. She looked nervous, but determined. "Dr. Havers," she said, I need to tell you something about the babies that have gone missing from our maternity ward." Lark quickly ushered her into the back office, where Jonah was ready with his recorder. For the next hour, Sarah detailed a pattern of suspicious incidents. Mothers told their babies hadn't survived, paperwork that disappeared, late-night transfers that didn't follow protocol. "I tried telling my supervisor," Sarah explained, wiping tears from her eyes. "She said I was imagining things, but after reading the paper today, I knew I had to come forward." By afternoon, 3 more hospital staff members had come forward with similar stories. Each account added another piece to the puzzle, strengthening their case against the trafficking network. The local TV news ran updates throughout the day. Reporters gathered outside the sheriff's office, where Deputy Marshall awkwardly fielded questions about Kincaid's suspension. The station kept replaying footage of the sheriff being escorted from the building, his face twisted in barely contained rage. "This is just the beginning," Jonah reminded Lark as they watched the coverage. "They'll try to discredit us, maybe even threaten us. But the truth is out there now. People are paying attention." Lark felt a mixture of triumph and anxiety. They'd landed the first significant blow against the trafficking network, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was still ahead. Still, seeing Kincaid stripped of his authority, even temporarily, gave her hope. "We need to be ready," she said, turning to face Jonah and Marisol. "They'll be desperate now. We have to protect our witnesses and secure more evidence before they can destroy it." The afternoon brought a steady stream of calls from state investigators, requesting statements and documentation. Lark and her team carefully shared what they could without revealing their full hand. Each piece of information was a calculated release, designed to keep pressure on the network while protecting their larger strategy. Through it all, Lark kept thinking about the 8 infants, now hidden away in that private clinic. Every moment of publicity, every small victory against the corruption, brought them one step closer to rescue. The public's eyes were opening, and in that light, the shadows where trafficking thrived began to recede. The night was thick with fog when Lark's phone buzzed at 2 a.m. Her heart jumped as she saw Marisol's name flash across the screen. "They're here," Marisol whispered, her voice trembling. 3 men, black SUV. They're trying to get into the clinic." Lark was already pulling on her boots. "I'm calling Jonah. Stay hidden. Police are on speed dial?" "Yes, but—" A crash echoed through the phone, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Marisol's breath caught. "Oh God, they're inside!" "Hold on, we're coming." Lark grabbed her keys and ran to her truck, dialing Jonah with shaking fingers. He answered on the first ring. "I'm 5 minutes out," he said before she could speak. "Don't go in alone." But Lark was already driving, her headlights cutting through the dense fog. The private clinic where they'd hidden the infants was on the outskirts of town, deliberately chosen for its security systems and discreet location. Now those same features made it terrifyingly isolated. She killed the truck's lights as she approached, catching glimpse of the black SUV parked haphazardly near the entrance. The front door hung open, glass scattered across the threshold. Her heart pounded as she crept toward the building. Inside, she heard heavy footsteps and male voices. "Check the back rooms," someone ordered. "Find those babies." Lark knew the clinic's layout by heart. While the intruders searched the front sections, she slipped in through the rear emergency exit. The hallway was dark, but she could navigate it blind. The infants were in the secure ward, behind 2 sets of locked doors. A scream pierced the silence. Marisol. Lark forced herself to stay focused, to keep moving toward the babies. She had to trust that her friend could handle herself. The secure ward's first door was still locked. Lark swiped her keycard with trembling hands, slipping inside just as flashlight beams swept the hallway behind her. She reached the inner room where the infants lay in their temperature-controlled bassinets. All 8 babies were there, miraculously still sleeping. Lark started disconnecting monitoring equipment as quietly as possible. They needed to be ready to move. The outer door beeped. Someone had a keycard. Lark's blood ran cold. She positioned herself between the door and the infants, grabbing a metal stand as a weapon. The door burst open. A man in dark clothes rushed in, holding something that glinted in the dim light. Lark swung the stand, catching him in the shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't fall. "Back off!" Lark's voice was steel. "You're not touching these babies." "Don't be stupid," he growled, advancing. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." The man lunged. Lark dodged, but his fist caught her temple. She staggered, vision blurring. The metal stand clattered to the floor. Behind her, one of the infants began to cry. Suddenly, the room blazed with light. Jonah stood in the doorway, holding a taser. "Step away from her!" The intruder spun, reaching for something in his jacket. Jonah fired. The man convulsed and dropped, twitching on the floor. "Lark!" Jonah rushed to help her up. "Are you okay? The police are coming. I got photos of their vehicle and called it in." More shouts echoed from the hallway. 2 more men appeared in the doorway, but now Lark and Jonah stood together, protecting the infants. One of the men had Marisol in a chokehold. "Last chance," the larger man said. "Step aside, or this gets ugly." Before anyone could move, sirens wailed in the distance. The men hesitated. The one holding Marisol shoved her forward, nearly knocking her down. "This isn't over," he spat. Then they were running, leaving their unconscious partner behind. Lark hugged Marisol tight, checking her for injuries. Besides some bruises, she seemed okay. Together they quickly checked each infant, ensuring they were unharmed. "They had hospital badges," Marisol said, still shaking. "I saw them when they grabbed me. Pine Hollow General." Jonah was already taking photos of the unconscious intruder and his ID. "This goes higher than Kincaid. They're desperate enough to risk everything now." Police cars surrounded the building, but Lark knew the real damage had been done. The trafficking network had shown its teeth, proven how far they'd go. As she cradled one of the crying infants, she realized with chilling clarity that next time, they might not be so lucky. Dawn crept through the windows of Lark's living room, where empty coffee cups and scattered papers covered every surface. No one had slept. The attack at the clinic had shaken them all, but it had also given them something crucial: proof. "These aren't just local thugs," Jonah said, spreading photos across the coffee table. "Look at the quality of their equipment, their tactical training. This is organized." Lark nodded, holding an ice pack to her temple where a purple bruise had formed. "The hospital badges Marisol saw are important. We need to follow that connection." Marisol sat cross-legged on the floor, her dark hair falling loose from its usual tight bun. She hadn't stopped trembling completely, but her voice was steady. "I recognized one of them. Marcus Weber. He works in hospital security, but I've seen him with Evelyn Rourke before." "How?" Lark asked gently. Marisol took a deep breath. 2 years ago, I was working late shifts in the maternity ward. Evelyn approached me, said she needed help with special adoptions. She made it sound legitimate at first, helping mothers who couldn't keep their babies find good homes. She wiped her eyes. "When I realized what was really happening, they threatened my family. I had to keep quiet." Jonah pulled out his laptop. Weber's employment records might give us something. The hospital system. I can get you in, Marisol interrupted. I still have my login credentials. They never revoked them. Probably didn't want to draw attention. Lark squeezed her friend's shoulder. You don't have to do this. It's dangerous enough already. I do have to, Marisol's chin lifted. I've been afraid for too long. These babies deserve better than what happened to the others. They watched as Marisol accessed the hospital's internal network. Years of records appeared, staff schedules, security rotations, and most importantly, access logs to the maternity ward. There, Jonah pointed. Look at these patterns. Every time a baby disappeared, Weber was on duty. And here, large payments from shell companies into the hospital's equipment fund on the same dates. Lark leaned closer. Can you trace those companies? Already on it. Jonah's fingers flew across the keyboard. They all lead back to Pine Hollow Development Corporation, main shareholders, Sheriff Kincaid and the Rourke family. The farmhouse where we found the babies, Lark said. It's on land owned by that corporation. Marisol stood up suddenly. I'll testify about everything. The threats, the cover-ups, every baby I saw them take. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was firm. I have documentation, dates, names, where they took the infants. I kept records just in case I ever found the courage. Lark pulled her into a tight hug. Are you sure? This puts you directly in their crosshairs. I'm sure. Marisol pulled back, meeting Lark's eyes. You showed me there's still good people willing to fight. I want to be one of them. Jonah was already making calls. I have contacts at the state police and FBI. With Marisol's testimony and these financial records, we can prove the connection between Kincaid, the hospital, and the trafficking network. They spent the next hours building their case. Marisol's detailed records provided dates and locations. The hospital's financial documents showed the money trail. Property records linked everything back to Kincaid and Rourke. Look at this, Lark said, spreading out a map. All their properties form a pattern, isolated locations near state borders, perfect for moving infants quickly out of jurisdiction. And the shell companies, Jonah added, they're not just local. There are connections to similar operations in 3 other states. Marisol's phone buzzed. Her face went pale as she read the message. They know. Evelyn just offered me money to stay quiet about old business. They're getting nervous. Good, Lark said firmly. Let them sweat. We have what we need now. Proof of their whole operation, from the hospital through transport to sales. And most importantly, she smiled at Marisol, we have someone brave enough to tell the truth. The morning sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across their evidence-strewn living room. They had their weapons for the final fight. Documents, testimony, and most importantly, each other. The traffickers' desperation had made them sloppy, and now they would pay for it. Red and blue lights pierced the pre-dawn darkness as police vehicles surrounded the farmhouse. Lark's heart pounded as she crouched behind an FBI tactical vehicle, watching SWAT teams take position. Beside her, Jonah adjusted his camera settings, ready to document everything. Remember, Agent Chen whispered, wait for our signal before approaching. Those infants will need immediate medical attention. Lark nodded, her medical bag ready. Through her night vision binoculars, she could see movement inside the farmhouse, shadows past windows, urgent and frantic. Multiple subjects confirmed, crackled the radio. Main targets identified, Kincaid and Rourke present. The night exploded into action. FBI, this is a federal raid. Exit the building with your hands up. For a moment, everything froze. Then gunfire erupted from an upstairs window. SWAT teams returned fire, precise and controlled. Lark flinched at each shot, thinking of the babies inside. They're using the infants as shields, someone shouted. Hold fire! Hold fire! Through her binoculars, Lark saw Evelyn Rourke appear at a window, clutching something wrapped in blankets. "Stay back, or this one dies." "Ms. Rourke," Agent Chen's voice boomed through a megaphone. "You're surrounded. Think about what you're doing." More movement caught Lark's eye, a side door opening. Sheriff Kincaid emerged, trying to slip away in the chaos. But FBI agents were already there, taking him down. His handcuffs clicked loudly in the sudden quiet. "It's over, Evelyn," Kincaid shouted as agents led him past. "Don't make it worse." Lark grabbed the megaphone from Agent Chen. "Evelyn, I'm Dr. Havers. Those babies need medical attention. You know that. Let me help them." A long pause followed. Then Evelyn's voice, breaking. "You don't understand. These families paid good money. They're counting on us." "Those families stole babies," Lark called back. "Real parents are searching for their children. Please, think about them." More silence. Then crying, an infant's wail joined by others. The sound tore at Lark's heart. "Coming out," Evelyn finally said. "Don't shoot. The babies." She appeared in the doorway, 3 infants cradled awkwardly in her arms. Behind her, 2 men emerged with more babies. Lark rushed forward with the medical team as SWAT secured the suspects. 8, Lark counted frantically as she checked each infant. "All 8 are here." Jonah's camera clicked rapidly, capturing everything: the arrests, the babies, the evidence being collected. His presence ensured this wouldn't be buried or denied. "Dr. Havers," Agent Chen called. "We need you inside. There's more." The farmhouse's basement revealed the operation's scope: medical equipment, forged documents, records of sales disguised as adoption fees. A map showed connection points across state lines, a network of similar safe houses and corrupt officials. "Their whole operation," Jonah whispered, photographing everything. "All the proof we need." Lark helped load the infants into waiting ambulances. Their tiny faces reminded her of that first night, when one cry had exposed everything. Now they would go to real hospitals, be reunited with their real families. As dawn broke, Lark watched Kincaid and Rourke loaded into FBI vehicles. The sheriff's badge was gone, his authority stripped away. Evelyn stared straight ahead, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "Dr. Havers," Agent Chen approached with a satellite phone. "There are some people who'd like to thank you." She held it out, and Lark heard crying. Not infants this time, but parents. Parents who had been searching, hoping, praying for this moment. "Your babies are safe," Larky told them, her own tears falling. "They're coming home." Jonah lowered his camera, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as they watched the vehicles pull away. Behind them, evidence teams continued documenting everything. The morning sun revealed the farmhouse for what it was: not just a building, but the center of a web that had finally been torn apart. The raid had succeeded beyond their hopes. 8 babies rescued, a trafficking ring exposed, corrupt officials arrested, and most importantly, families would be reunited, their long nightmare finally over. "Look," Jonah pointed as the ambulances pulled away, lights flashing. "That's what justice looks like." Lark leaned against him, exhausted but satisfied. The sound of sirens faded into the distance, carrying precious cargo to safety. Behind them, federal agents continued their work, ensuring every piece of evidence was preserved, every connection documented, every truth exposed to light. 3 months after the raid, Lark sat in her living room, cradling little Sophie. The infant who had first alerted her to the trafficking ring now dozed peacefully in her arms, while they waited for Sophie's birth mother to arrive. "She looks so different now," Marisol observed, perched on the couch nearby. "Healthy? Happy?" Lark nodded, touching Sophie's rosy cheek. The sickly, hypothermic infant from that terrifying night had transformed into a thriving baby. All 8 rescued infants had made similar recoveries, Their resilience amazing everyone involved in their care. The doorbell rang. Marisol went to answer it, returning with Amanda Pierce, Sophie's birth mother. The young woman's eyes filled with tears at the sight of her daughter. "She's beautiful," Amanda whispered, settling beside Lark. "I can't believe I finally found her." Lark carefully transferred Sophie into her mother's arms. "She's been such a joy to foster, but she belongs with you." "Thank you for taking care of her," Amanda said. "The social worker told me how you found her, what you did to expose everything. I don't know how to repay you." "Just love her," Lark replied simply. "That's all any of us wanted, to get these babies back to the families who love them." Marisol excused herself, heading out to pick up her own daughter from school. The past months had seen her rebuilding that relationship, making up for time lost while under Kincaid's coercion. Her testimony had been crucial in securing convictions, and the prosecutor had recommended leniency given her cooperation. After Amanda and Sophie left, Lark stood at her window, watching them drive away. Arms slipped around her waist as Jonah joined her. "Hard to let her go?" he asked softly. "Yes and no," Lark answered. "I'll miss her. But this is right. This is what we fought for." His presence steadied her, as it had throughout the investigation and trials. Their partnership had deepened naturally into romance, built on shared values and mutual respect. "The story's running tomorrow," Jonah said. "Full exposé, everything from the initial discovery to the convictions. The FBI says it's already helping them identify similar operations in other states." Lark turned in his arms. "Good. The more light we shine on this, the harder it'll be for anyone else to exploit desperate families." "Speaking of families," he said, "Marisol told me she's taking her daughter camping this weekend. Real mother-daughter bonding time." "She deserves that happiness," Lark smiled. "After everything she risked to help us." They moved to the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in gentle pinks and golds. The same view that had once seemed shadowed by corruption now felt cleansed, renewed. "I've been thinking," Jonah said carefully, "about family, about us." Lark squeezed his hand. "Me too." They had discussed marriage, children of their own someday, but for now, they were content building their life together, knowing they had already created something meaningful, justice for 8 innocent lives, healing for broken families, hope for the future. The evening settled around them peacefully. In homes across town and beyond, rescued infants slept safely in their parents' arms. Marisol shared dinner with her daughter, rebuilding trust one day at a time. And here on this porch, Lark and Jonah held each other, their love strengthened by the battles they had fought and won together. The next morning dawned crisp and clear over Pine Hollow. At the local diner, regulars clustered around newspapers featuring Jonah's exposé. The headlines told a story that would forever change their town. Small-town heroes break international trafficking ring. Lark pushed her coffee cup aside, scanning the faces of her neighbors. Some showed shame for not seeing what had happened under their noses. Others displayed pride that justice had finally prevailed. The corruption had run deeper than anyone imagined, reaching into hospital administration, local government, and beyond. "Your pancakes are getting cold," Marisol said, sliding into the booth across from her. Her eyes were bright, her posture relaxed, so different from the fearful woman she'd been months ago. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Lark replied. "Remember when we thought we were just responding to a call about puppies?" Marisol shook her head. "I'll never forget that night. Or how you stood up to Kincaid when everyone else would have backed down." The bell above the diner door chimed as Jonah entered, his laptop tucked under his arm. He'd been fielding calls from national media outlets all morning, carefully controlling the narrative to protect the family's privacy, while ensuring the full scope of the corruption came to light. "Just got off the phone with the FBI," he said, joining them. "They've identified 3 more networks using similar methods. Our case is helping them build stronger prevention protocols." Lark felt a surge of satisfaction. Their local victory was creating ripples far beyond Pine Hollow's borders. "How are the families doing?" "Healing," Marisol answered. "I spoke with the support group coordinator yesterday. The parents are connecting, sharing resources. They're talking about starting an advocacy organization." Through the diner window, they could see the town square where just yesterday, a community gathering had honored those who helped break the case. Lark had been uncomfortable with the attention, but she understood the town's need to reckon with what had happened and celebrate those who stood for justice. "The hospital board meeting is this afternoon," Jonah mentioned. "They're implementing new security measures, better oversight, real change." "Good," Lark said firmly. "No more looking the other way. No more pretending not to see." A young mother walked past their booth, pushing a stroller. She paused, meeting Lark's eyes with gratitude. Her baby had been one of the 8 rescued that night. No words were needed. The healthy infant's coos said everything about the impact of their actions. "My daughter asked me something interesting last night," Marisol said softly. "She wanted to know if I was a hero too. I told her sometimes being brave means admitting your mistakes and trying to fix them." Lark reached across the table, squeezing her friend's hand. "You are a hero, Marisol. Your testimony broke the case wide open. You risked everything to help those babies." The diner's regular buzz of conversation surrounded them, but it felt different now. The town's silence had been broken. People were talking, questioning, demanding better from their leaders. Pine Hollow would never be the same, and that was a good thing. "I filed my last story on the case this morning," Jonah said. "But I keep thinking about what you told me that first night, Lark, about how sometimes the right thing is also the only thing you can do." Lark nodded, remembering the clarity she'd felt despite the danger and uncertainty. "When I saw those babies, there was no choice. Not really. We had to act." The morning light streamed through the windows, warming their booth. Outside, Pine Hollow was waking up to a new day, forever changed by the courage of those who refused to look away from injustice. The healing would take time, but it had begun, for the families, for the town, for everyone touched by their story. They finished their breakfast, each lost in thought about the journey that had brought them here. 3 ordinary people who had chosen to do extraordinary things, not for glory or recognition, but because it was right. Their actions had not only saved lives, but had shown others the power of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost.